Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The field of partial differential equations, particularly the study of regularity for solutions to parabolic equations, represents a landscape of profound intellectual achievement, built upon decades of refinement and innovation. Within this domain, the 2016 paper by Fabio, Marchese and Vincenzo Vespri, titled Hölder Continuity of Solutions for a Class of Parabolic Equations, presents itself as a work of considerable technical sophistication. It endeavours to establish a fundamental qualitative property, Hölder continuity, for a class of equations characterized by a complex, doubly nonlinear structure. This essay undertakes a direct and systematic evaluation of the specific claims, frameworks, and argumentative mechanisms presented within this paper. The analysis will proceed section by section, examining the internal logic and the stated contributions of the work to assess how its conclusions are constructed and justified, from its foundational assumptions to its final theorem. Our inquiry is focused exclusively on the internal architecture of the paper's argument, offering a critical appraisal of its mathematical and conceptual scaffolding for an audience familiar with the rigors of advanced analysis. Section 1. The problem formulation and structural hypotheses. The paper commences by delineating its object of study, a class of parabolic partial differential equations. The general form is expressed as the time derivative of a solution, which we will call U, minus the spatial divergence of a vector field, which we will call A, is equal to 0. The vector field is a function of position x, time t, the solution U itself, and the spatial gradient of U. This formulation immediately positions the work within the challenging realm of quasi-linear parabolic equations, where the differential operator's coefficients depend on the solution or its derivatives. The author's central claim in this introductory section is that their methodology can successfully address a doubly nonlinear structure. This means the vector field exhibits nonlinear dependence on both the solution U and its gradient. Specifically, they impose a set of structural conditions on the vector field A. These conditions are the bedrock upon which the entire analytical edifice is built. The first is a coercivity or ellipticity condition, which states that the dot product of the vector field with the gradient of U is bounded from below by the magnitude of the gradient raised to the power p for some exponent p greater than 1, minus a term involving the solution U raised to a power q. The second is a growth condition, which bounds the magnitude of the vector field from above by a function involving the gradient raised to the power p minus 1, plus a term involving the solution U raised to a power q divided by p prime, where p prime is the Hölder conjugate of p. These conditions, involving the exponents p and q, precisely define the scope of the investigation. The authors assert that this framework is general enough to encompass significant models, including the evolutionary p-Laplacian equation when the exponent q is set to certain values, and other equations where the diffusion process is modulated by the density of the quantity being studied. The evaluation of the section's claims centers on their clarity and sufficiency. The hypotheses are articulated with mathematical precision, leaving little ambiguity about the class of equations under consideration. The claim of generality is substantiated by the abstract formulation, which consolidates various specific physical models under a single, coherent mathematical structure. This initial section effectively establishes a well-defined problem and a set of workable assumptions, thereby providing a stable foundation for the complex technical arguments that are to follow. The choice of these particular structural conditions is a deliberate one, designed to be just strong enough to permit the subsequent regularity proof while remaining broad enough to be meaningful. Section 2. The intrinsic geometry and functional framework. Having specified the equation, The authors then detail the analytical framework required for its study. This section introduces the concept of a weak solution, a cornerstone of modern PDD theory. A weak solution is defined within a specific function space, obviating the need for classical differentiability which solutions to such equations frequently lack. The space chosen is a Bochner space, specifically functions belonging to the space LP in time with values in the Sobolev space W1, P in space, whose time derivatives belong to the dual space. The author's implicit claim is that this is the natural energetic setting for the problem. The evaluation of this claim is positive. This choice of function space directly reflects the structural conditions, as the exponent P from the growth condition dictates the integrability requirements on the spatial gradient. The most significant claim of this section, however, pertains to the adoption of an intrinsic scaling. For parabolic equations, the relationship between space and time is critical. In the classical heat equation, this scaling is fixed and parabolic, with space scaling as the square root of time. For the degenerate equations studied here, Marchese and Vespri employ an intrinsic geometry. This means the scaling relationship between space and time is itself dependent on the local magnitude of the solution. The analysis proceeds within parabolic cylinders whose temporal and spatial dimensions are related through a factor that involves a local norm of the solution U. This technique recognizes that in regions where the solution is large or its gradient is small, the equation's parabolicity degenerates, and information propagates at a different relative speed. The core argument is that a regularity theory can only be built by respecting this dynamic, solution-dependent geometry. This claim is central to the entire paper. The methodology's success hinges on whether this intrinsic scaling can effectively normalize the equation's behavior, rendering it tractable to analysis across different scales and solution magnitudes. The selection of this framework is a testament to the influence of pioneers like Di Benedetto, whose work on degenerate parabolic equations established intrinsic scaling as an indispensable tool. The author's contribution here is the specific adaptation of this philosophy to their doubly nonlinear structure, defining the scaling parameters in a way that accommodates the interplay between the P-Laplacian type nonlinearity and the additional dependence on the solution U. The argument for its necessity is compelling, as any fixed scaling approach would fail to capture the equation's locally changing character. Section 3. The refined Cacciopoli inequality. The technical heart of the paper begins to beat in the section dedicated to deriving a Cacciopoli type inequality. A Cacciopoli inequality is a fundamental energy estimate in the theory of partial differential equations. In its essence, it provides a bound on the norm of the gradient of a solution within a given domain in terms of the norm of the solution itself within a slightly larger, concentric domain. It serves as a bridge, translating information about the solution's size into information about its smoothness. The primary claim of Marchese and Vespri in this section is the derivation of a new Cacciopoli inequality specifically tailored to the doubly nonlinear structure and the intrinsic geometry previously established. The proof of this inequality is a meticulous exercise in algebraic manipulation and the application of integral identities. It begins with the weak formulation of the equation, tested with a carefully chosen function of the form u multiplied by a cutoff function squared. The cutoff function is essential for localizing the estimate. The subsequent steps involve applying the structural conditions on the vector field A, using Young's inequality to manage the various terms, and carefully absorbing terms on the left-hand side. The resulting inequality is a complex expression that bounds the integral of the gradient of u to the power p over an intrinsic parabolic cylinder by an expression involving integrals of powers of u over a larger cylinder. The exponents in this final estimate are critical. They are derived directly from the structural exponents p and q and the scaling parameters of the intrinsic geometry. The evaluation of this section's claim is an assessment of the inequality's utility. The authors implicitly argue that their Cacciopoli estimate is sharp enough to power the subsequent iterative argument for Hölder continuity. Its sharpness lies in how it precisely quantifies the balance of energy. The terms arising from the P-Laplacian structure and the terms arising from the nonlinearity in nu are both controlled, with their relative influence captured by the derived exponents. This inequality is the engine of the proof. Without an estimate of this caliber, which respects the equation's dual nonlinearities and intrinsic scaling, any attempt to establish regularity would stall. The authors successfully demonstrate that such a precise tool can be forged from their initial structural hypotheses, and its form appears well suited for the iterative machinery of the de Giorgi method. Section 4. The iterative argument and oscillation decay. This section operationalizes the Cacciopoli inequality within an iterative scheme inspired by the work of Ennio de Giorgi. The goal is to prove that the oscillation of the solution, defined as the difference between its essential supremum and essential infimum, decays as one zooms into smaller and smaller domains. Achieving this would directly imply Hölder continuity. The central claim is that a specific iterative process, applied to the level sets of the solution, leads to this decay. The argument is famously intricate. The authors consider a sequence of shrinking intrinsic parabolic cylinders. Within each cylinder, they analyze the measure of the set where the solution U exceeds a certain level, or alternately, the set where U lies below a certain level. The strategy is to show that if the measure of, for instance, the superlevel set is small relative to the measure of the whole cylinder, then the essential supremum of the solution in a smaller, nested cylinder must decrease by a certain amount. A parallel argument applies to the infimum. The proof of this key iterative lemma involves combining the Cacciopoli inequality with a Sobolev-Poincare inequality, which relates the norm of a function to the norm of its gradient. This combination allows one to control the infinity norm of the solution by a lower LQ integral norm. By iterating this control over the sequence of shrinking cylinders, the authors construct a recursive relationship for the oscillation. The evaluation of this section's argument is an appreciation of its technical execution. The claim that this iteration leads to oscillation decay is substantiated by the precise algebraic structure of the recursion they derive. The genius of the de Giorgi method, which they adapt, is that it transforms an analytical problem about function regularity into a geometric problem about the measure of level sets. Marchese and Vespri's contribution is the successful navigation of the technical hurdles introduced by the doubly nonlinear structure. The exponents from the Cacciopoli inequality propagate through the iteration, and their careful management is paramount. The authors demonstrate that, under their chosen structural conditions, the parameters of the iteration can be set up in such a way that the oscillation is guaranteed to decrease by a fixed factor at each step, provided a certain condition on the level sets is met. This establishes a geometric decay, which is the hallmark of a successful de Giorgi-style proof. Section 5. The logarithmic alternative. And final. Prove. The iterative scheme described in the previous section is powerful, but it has a condition of applicability. The argument for oscillation decay relies on the measure of either the superlevel or sublevel set being sufficiently small. This leaves open the logical possibility that the solution might HUD its median value, with both level sets occupying a significant fraction of the domain's measure. In this scenario, the primary iteration stalls. To address this, the authors introduce a second, complementary argument, often involving a logarithmic estimate. The claim in this section is that this alternative pathway provides the necessary oscillation decay precisely when the main iteration does not apply, thereby creating a complete and inescapable proof structure. They construct a different test function for the weak formulation, one involving the logarithm of the solution U or transformations thereof. This leads to a different kind of estimate. A logarithmic estimate is particularly effective for functions that are already close to being constant, as the logarithm function varies most slowly for large arguments. It typically shows that the oscillation of the logarithm of u is controlled, which in turn controls the oscillation of u itself, by demonstrating that one of these two mechanisms, the main de Giorgi iteration or the logarithmic alternative, must yield a reduction in oscillation at any given scale. The authors close the logical loop. The final step is to synthesize these results. They show that at each step of a sequence of shrinking parabolic cylinders, the oscillation decreases by a multiplicative factor that is strictly less than 1. This geometric decay of the oscillation is equivalent to the definition of Hölder continuity, the explicit Hölder exponent, which quantifies the degree of smoothness, can be calculated from the parameters of the iteration, including the structural exponents p and q and the dimensionality of the space. The evaluation of this concluding portion of the proof confirms its logical completeness. The authors successfully construct a robust argument by ensuring all possible behaviors of the solution are accounted for. The claim that these two pathways are exhaustive is sound. This structure of proof, combining a main iteration with a complementary case for flat solutions, has become a standard, powerful technique in modern regularity theory. Marchese and Vespri's execution of this strategy, within the context of their doubly nonlinear equation, is a demonstration of high-tech legal proficiency. The final theorem, stating that any weak solution to the equation under their specified hypotheses is locally held continuous, is thus shown to be a direct and rigorously derived consequence of the preceding chain of lemmas and est. Section 6. Synthesis and implications of the main theorem. In conclusion, the 2016 paper by Fabio Marchese and Vincenzo Vespri presents a thorough and convincing argument for the Hölder continuity of solutions to a significant class of doubly nonlinear parabolic equations. A systematic evaluation of its internal claims reveals a logical progression of impeccable rigor. The work begins by establishing a precise set of structural hypotheses that are both general in scope and mathematically tractable. It then correctly identifies the intrinsic, solution-dependent geometry as the necessary framework for analysis, a fundamental insight for this class of degenerate equations. The author's principal technical contribution is the derivation of a refined Cacciopoli inequality, meticulously crafted to reflect the dual non-linearities of the problem. This estimate serves as the indispensable fuel for a sophisticated iterative scheme based on the de Giorgi method. The argument is rendered complete and robust by the inclusion of a logarithmic estimate, which handles the case where the primary iteration is inconclusive. The result is a chain of reasoning where each link is forged with precision. The structural assumptions enable the Cacciopoli inequality, which powers the iterative lemmas, which together guarantee the geometric decay of oscillation, culminating in the proof of Hölder continuity. The paper's significance lies in this demonstration of technical mastery. It shows how the foundational principles of regularity theory, such as energy estimates and iterative methods, can be adapted and sharpened to conquer equations of increasing complexity. The author's claims are consistently supported by detailed, transparent proofs, and the final theorem stands as a well-earned conclusion. The work provides a clear blueprint for tackling similar problems and solidifies the understanding of regularity for an important class of physical and mathematical models, serving as a valuable contribution to the ongoing development of the theory of partial differential equations. Its enduring value is found in the clarity of its architecture and the successful execution of its complex analytical program.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.